in Japan, our neighbors, how we can do this communication. This is very helpful and also very sensitive.
Okay, so you just heard that, how they were going to communicate with each other. I'm going to skip ahead because I've been going a while, and I want to leave enough time to talk about the automated tolls. But this case was prosecuted by many jurisdictions, and Mr. Whittle ended up going to jail in the UK, I believe, for 27 months, and the other gentleman from England went to jail for 24 months, 22 months. The Frenchman went to jail. Most of the guys that were involved in this went to jail. So it was a very effective and successful prosecution of the case. But I wanted to show it to you because I think it's very typical of a bid rigging situation, and you kind of get a chance to get inside the room and see what the motivations are and what the thinking is, and actually see a real case. So I'm sorry we don't have time to play more of it, but I do want to address our case study that we've been talking about here today. And I'm showing you here from my home state of Florida the Florida Sun Pass, which my mother has in her car. And it's a very neat pass. It's an automated toll. Just to give you an example, these are very common in the United States now. And I think this is what you would call a free-flowing toll, so that you could get in this lane here for the prepaid tolls. You keep left, and you don't have to go through the toll booth. You can kind of just zoom down that lane. You don't really even have to slow down. You don't have to break your speed. The technology is able to scan the card that you have sitting on the top or attached to the top of the windshield. So it's a technology that's used now in the United States. This is a close-up of what the card looks like that's attached to the windshield. As I was saying earlier, during the earlier panels, tolls are still, I would say, in the minority of roads in the United States. Most roads don't have tolls. I lived in Texas for 10 years when I started off with the DOJ. And it's funny, Texas is a very, for those of you who haven't been there, a very independent state. Texas was its own country before it was a state, part of the United States. For several years, it was its own country when it won its independence from Mexico. And it always has this reputation. The people there are very tough, independent, and they don't want to pay tolls. They've made that clear to their legislature. And so there are a few toll roads, like maybe to the airport in Houston or something like that. But you could drive all around Texas and not see a toll road. And the roads there are very good. They're very well-maintained roads. And so there's that situation. And then I think probably in the other extreme is you have a state like Florida, where one of the big industries in Florida is tourism. And so when tourists, like Brazilians, come to go shopping in Miami or go to Disney World, you fly to Orlando, then you rent a car, or you fly to Miami, you rent a car, drive to Orlando, and some of you have actually driven on the Florida Turnpike and paid whatever, $13 or whatever it is to drive from Miami to Orlando. And I think part of the thinking there is it's for revenue to maintain the turnpike, but it's also a revenue tool for Florida because you have so many people coming, not just from abroad, but also from within the United States, who don't live in Florida, but they're using Florida's roads. And they're not paying taxes in Florida, but they're using Florida's infrastructure. And so I think it makes sense to have tolls in that situation. Another example of a state is New Jersey, where you have tolls, the New Jersey Turnpike. It's constant tolls. If you drive from Washington to New York, you'll go through New Jersey. And I think there, again, a big justification is you have so many people driving through New Jersey. You have so much commerce in terms of trucks that are going through the northeast corridor of the United States. It's such a populated area of our country that they don't live in New Jersey. You know, they don't pay New Jersey income taxes, but they're using New Jersey's roads. So there's a lot of maintenance on those roads, and there are tolls. You have the Easy Pass toll, which is a very common one as well. So in some states, I think out west in the United States, the western United States, not including California, but sort of the middle and the west, you don't have tolls. What you have is a situation where you have the state or the local municipality letting out a bid for road construction or road maintenance, saying, here is a request for bids, and we're entertaining all bids, and then they get contractors, road builders, to come in and submit bids to do that work. The contract of the work is as long as it takes to get the work done. It's not 30 years. If it takes 2 years to fix the road or to build a new ramp, that's how long the contract's for. And so at the end of that, the contractor gets his money, or along the way, he or she gets paid, and then the job's done. And then the state owns that road. And so they're sort of paying as they go, ad hoc, for the services that need to be done. Now, some states have more money. Texas seems to have quite a bit of money, is well run fiscally. Other states don't have a lot of money, and in any event, what states or municipalities often do to raise the capital is issue bonds, municipal bonds for construction. So they're borrowing money. They'll have a vote from the citizens to approve the bond to be issued, and they'll raise money for the construction project through the bond, and then there's a low percentage rate that's paid to the investors. Anyone can invest in a bond. I live in Virginia. I can buy a bond as part of an investment for a New York bridge project, and I might get paid, you know, some low percentage rate. But the government encourages that kind of investing of municipal bonds because the income is not taxable. So, there's an incentive there for people to invest and to buy those kind of bonds to encourage investments to help states and municipalities raise money for projects. So that's one way the capital is brought in. I'm not saying I'm not suggesting that's the best method for Brazil. I'm not saying that this system is not working, your privatized system. Frankly, you know, the United States, most of the roads are built. It's a question, I think, of maintaining and, you know, making sure the bridges are secure and keeping things up. You know, I don't know that the United States can say it's experienced the kind of explosive growth that your country is seeing now. Maybe in the 1950s or something like that. I don't know, but it's a different situation in terms of the needs between, you know, the United States and what Brazil's needs are, certainly. So I don't know that it's perfectly analogous, but that's more or less how the system works. Now, a state like Florida or New Jersey, when they have a desire for a toll, what they'll typically do is have a bid for the automated toll, and they'll have companies come in and bid for that service, to be able to provide that service to the state. And the bids are not 20, 25-year bids. I was very surprised to see when I started to look at this study that the bids were for that length of time. And I understand there's a correlation between the amount of the toll and you know, the amount of the time of the contract and the amount of work that's invested by the concessionaire. But it seems like all of the contracts are you know, for 2 decades. For 20 years, that's the minimum. So you wouldn't, in the United States, see anything, I think, for that long a time. I think 5 years, 10 years would be much more at the outer limits of what you would see as far as the length of a contract. But it's a competitively bid contract, and so you'll get all sorts of companies that come in. Lockheed Martin, which you probably heard of, which is a big defense contractor. All sorts of companies will come in and try to bid to provide these services. And so in the case study in Brazil, we've talked about a lot of the facts here. You know, you're starting with a bid, as I understand it. in terms of the concession. They can be up to 30 years contract. We've talked about the STP. Professor Claudio covered the approval with CAJE. But I think this is a very significant fact, and it shouldn't get lost, that CAJE, when it approved the STP consortium, did so with the condition that the STP couldn't create any barriers to entry for any new entrants or competitors. And so this is what you would call a behavioral, in the United States we would call a behavioral remedy or a behavioral restriction as opposed to a structural, which I'll talk about in a second. And so that's very important because, you know, CAJE obviously had some reservations, had some concern, and they didn't just give them a blanket approval, the consortium. They said, listen, you've got to at least be open or make the platform accessible to other people to come in on the automated toll services. And so, again, this is some more information. I think we've pretty much covered sort of the structure of STP and the percentage of ownership, 74%. We talked about this, and I think that's a very significant fact. Tells you a lot. Tells you, this speaks volumes, this one little fact, that there are lower prices on the non-STP roads. And, you know, the question is, well, are those roads as good? Is the quality on those roads as high? Are those roads, are the services of the automated tolls as good as the STP tolls? My guess is they probably are. I don't know that for a fact, but it's interesting. And so then we have the situation of the compulsory tolls, where I understand that cargo tolls would be paid by the shipper, which would relieve the independent truckers of the burden of having to pay the tolls, and that your National Transportation Authority has required that compulsory tolls be adopted, but that was 3 years ago, and that the new entrants are still waiting to get in the game here. And I don't know all of the facts here, but it sounds like that there have been some technical obstacles that have been put up by the STP to kind of make it more difficult for the new entrant to get involved. And that's something that I think, you know, would be a situation that I would think CAJE would be interested in hearing about. Because again, it goes back to the condition that they set in approving STP. It goes back to that. Seems like that was the big condition. And I would think that CAJE would be very interested in knowing more about what are the specific reasons for the delays in making sure that platform for automated tolls is accessible to the new entrants, to make sure it's technically feasible. So I think these are issues to be looked at. I can't say that, you know, these are STPs violating any, you know, is absolutely guilty. I don't know enough facts, frankly, but one thing I would say is that for most of these kinds of issues that we've discussed, and I'll discuss them some more, abuse of dominance, refusal to deal, in the United States at least, most of these are a civil antitrust offense. Remember, we talked about the criminal. We've covered that. That's price fixing, market allocation, and bid rigging. Those are things I think Brazilians need to be on the lookout for and concerned about, given the massive infrastructure investment. But as far as what's happening with the automated tolls, I think these are more civil situations. There's a civil body of antitrust law where, you know, CAJE or some other enforcement authority can go in and try to fix a situation.